G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here, with a picture of what a lot of people would have thought of as a V1 Vergeltungswaffe Vengeance Weapon 1, made by the German Feisler company with the intention of bombarding London, because that was the political game plan being run by the German government at the time, operated by Adolf Hitler. But this is actually an American air-breathing, pulse jet-powered cruise missile, manufactured by the Ford Motor Company, and first test launched in October 1944. The Loon was never used in combat. The project was cancelled in 1950. Today the Loon is on display at the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center in Northern Virginia. 27-foot long Loon could carry 2,200 pound explosive 150 miles. So I would say the precedent has been set that it is not impossible to sell pulse jet engines to the excited states government of Norte Armed Americano. But if you want to sell pulse jet engines to the Yankees, it really bloody helps if you're going to manufacture them in the excited states. And it also kind of helps if you're not going to gazump the contract of anybody else who used to be in the business of selling turbojet engines and turbofan engines to a US aerospace manufacturer of airframes supplying cruise missiles and drones to the US Navy. Now, why do I say all that? I say all that because a YouTube friend of mine, a bloke called Bruce Simpson, who lives in New Zealand, even though he's actually an expatriate emu, he's not a Kiwi at all. Bruce Simpson became globally virally famous on YouTube because he had a cruise missile with a pulse jet engine that he'd built in his backyard and kept it in his garden shed. And he was looking for permission from the New Zealand government to test fly the pulse jet powered cruise missile. And unlike the old German version, which was sort of roughly gyroscopically stabilised and guided by a primitive autopilot, Bruce had got your latest, greatest GPS activated autopilot from the local radio control model suppliers. And his kerosene burning, white hot glowing cruise missile was projected to do 250 to 300 mile an hour, roar around the sky with the precision of a GPS. And my understanding from looking at various movies, some of which have been made by Bruce, is that he had a tentative contract lined up with the US aerospace airframe manufacturer to supply them with these pulse jet engines, because they're, compared to a turbojet, they're dirt cheap to manufacture. They're not efficient, you know, like they're a really fucking dangerous way of turning kerosene into noise, and they produce a little bit of residual thrust as a side effect. Pretty much the thrust is caused by the compression wave of the noise detonating the fuel inside the glowing tube. So anyway, yeah, Bruce had a contract to undercut the turbojet, turbofan engine suppliers, and that no doubt caused various lobbies in Washington run by the unions, on workers on the production line, and the shareholders who wanted their dividends, to pressurise Washington to go over there to Kiwi land and stamp on the fucking expatriate emu who was upsetting their business plan profit forecasts. What really stuffed it for poor old Brucey was that he was contacted by the Iranians. Now, blind Freddy could see that if you're indulging in the arms trade, then you can only really honourably sell technology to one side of a conflict. So if you've got a contract happening with the Yankees in the excited states of Norte Armed Americano, the people who describe Iran as one of the countries on the axis of evil, then when the Iranians ring you up and ask if they can share in the pulse jet cruise missile engine technology, the only honourable answer is no. Straight away, without prevarication or hovering or fucking about. The only honourable answer is no, I'm already indulging or engaging in the mercenary arms trade with your enemy. I cannot, in all conscience, therefore supply you also. Sadly, that's not what Bruce said. What Bruce said was, oh, I don't know. I'll ask the New Zealand Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade if there's any objection. And apparently, Bruce must have struck a desk being operated by an ageing employee, somebody who could recall the days when New Zealand was considered a paragon of virtue in the world because it was a nuclear-free zone, and therefore the US Navy refused to visit New Zealand because the Kiwis demanded confirmation that their ships had no nuclear weapons. And the US always refused to confirm or deny whether they were carrying nuclear weapons. So rather than push the issue, the Americans didn't send any of their drunken syphilitic sailors to fuck the Kiwi women. For 20 years. So yeah, the Foreign Affairs and Trade Department told Bruce, no, we have no objection. You can sell your pulse jet engine cruise missiles to the Iranians if you want. Didn't take long for that one to get to the secret squirrel brigade in Washington. Didn't take long for the lobbyists in Washington who'd been sort of, only talking about profit. Suddenly they were talking patriotism, and Uncle Sam come down to New Zealand and they jumped all over the New Zealand government, busted their balls, right? Kicked them up the arse until their nose was bleeding. And therefore the Kiwi government said to Bruce, oh, listen, mate, you know that back taxes debt that we were letting you pay off slowly in instalments? Sorry, buddy, but Uncle Sam says we have to tell you to pay it back by Monday morning at 9 o'clock next week. And poor old Brucey couldn't get a loan that fast. So he was declared bankrupt by the Kiwi government. That means they didn't get paid their full tax debt, but it meant that because he was a bankrupt, the American aerospace airframe manufacturer was able to say, oh, look, subsection clause, if either of the signatories becomes insolvent, then the contract is void. So Bruce lost his contract to sell cruise missile pulse jet engines to the excited states. And meanwhile, the Foreign Affairs Department said, no, you can't sell them to Iran because Iran is an enemy of the United States. So if that was a joke, Bruce, it was a fucking expensive joke, and it's still backfiring because it meant that there were already very high-level government officials who were pissed off with you personally. You had made them look like fools and impotent buffoons. So, when you couldn't sell cruise missile pulse jet engines to both sides of the US-Iran conflict, then, Bruce, you decided to boost your X-Jet channel and make money off YouTube views by filming the people at the local aero club having a good time. And that was great, if only you'd stuck to that. Trouble is, there's a point of view which suggests that it is funny to interject excoriating comments into the conversation regarding a different member of the group at every interjection. I used to be an unconscious supporter of that point of view. I used to practice that technique conversationally. And when I was about 19 and I was a student nurse at a big city training hospital, I was lucky enough that the hospital was big enough that they employed a staff psychologist. And because I was giving everybody the shits by verbally, conversationally skewering a different member of whatever group I was a part of in order to get everybody else to laugh with me, nursing admin sent me to be paid to talk to the staff psychologist who was being paid to tell me about the error of my ways. And eventually we decided that I was actually fairly insecure, and I was unconsciously anxious, and I was absolutely desperate for acceptance. And that's why I was skewering a different person every time they opened their mouth, and I could see a double entendre that I could jump on, because I could manipulate everybody else in the group to laugh with me about somebody else. And I thought that because I kept changing the targets, that I was therefore spreading it out evenly, and thus and because I was not being a bully. That's what I actually thought. It didn't occur to me until the psychologist explained it that what I was doing was individually, personally alienating each member of the group, until finally everybody thought I was a fuckwit and they were all very happy to see anything go wrong in my life. So Bruce, half the club didn't like you because you were making money by laughing about them on YouTube. Were you offering to share any of the pittance YouTube was giving you? I doubt it. You may have been. I may misread that. But I'll bet you didn't think it was necessary, that it was worthwhile sharing. You wanted it all for yourself because you were the great movie maker. You were the great expert. You were the great narrator. Then you took some of your friends who were still on your side, probably the better flyers in the club. You took them on an away visit to a fly-in being run by Model Flying New Zealand. The old-fashioned cocoa-drinking, stodgy fuddy-duddies who were using what you saw as old technology, and they weren't sufficiently progressive and up with the times. And you and your mates had a pretty good little movie lampooning them. I think it might have been a 2-part movie even. But you thereby alienated the people who were in a position to say no. We think you're a bloody safety risk. You do things that we don't agree with. You're laughing at us. So they took away your wings. They pressured the local council to stop the club from flying as long as you were a member of the club. So they kicked you out of the club. They took away your wings. Now, because you're trying to develop some rinky-dink whiz-bang bit of technology that you think the world's going to be forced to adopt, because you think it'll do a better job than what they've already got billions of fucking dollars invested in implementing as collision avoidance already for the general aviation field. So, you know, as a side comment, good luck with that. You'll be pushing shit uphill. And because you can't do it at the frequency you'd like to do, you're doing it at a frequency that you're allowed to do, and on that frequency you're pretty much allowed to do anything. Therefore you worked out that you might slightly raise the electronic noise level threshold in the vicinity of the hangar you're doing the tests. And that's because you've travelled up to the far end of the airfield to talk to a bunch of people who you know can't stand you, because even after they kicked you out of the club for laughing at their fuck-ups, you've continued to use a 35-power gyro-stabilised tripod-mounted zoom lens to film their fuck-ups and laugh at them on YouTube. You go up there and you say to them, oh, listen, by the way, fellas, I know you guys aren't nearly as clever at radio as the great Bruce Simpson is, and therefore your radio gear may not be absolutely perfect. And thus, and because when the great Bruce Simpson fiddles about in his shed down there and slightly increases the electronic noise threshold, your model might turn upside down and crash because your radio gear might be shithouse. It didn't occur to you that they might take that as a threat. Because you going up and saying, oh, well, you know, I'm not allowed to fly at the field, so therefore I'm going to test some radio gear and your model might crash. Didn't occur to you? Bruce, you're one of the few people that I can say who's got less social skills than I have. And that's saying something, because I have a close personal friendship with more swamp wallabies and kangaroos than I have with people. And your interpersonal skills are worse than mine, mate, because I learnt this shit about not irritating the people I was trying to play with when I was 19. I'm 52 turning 53 and you're within 5 years of my age, and you're still doop-de-doop-de-doo. I'm Bruce, I can do what I want to do and everybody has to put up with it even when I'm laughing at them. It's not right, mate. It's not right at all. If you want them to help you do what you want to do, to let you do what you want to do, they have to think you're a good bloke. And if they think that you like laughing at them for being fuckwits in your eyes, they will never think you're a good enough bloke to help you or let you do it. So how about you back off illuminating their flaws and faults and try and invite them to laugh with you at yourself? Why do you think I refer to myself as the fool on the hill, the hillbilly hermit? mad scientist. It's because the madness isn't dangerous and the science is pretty good. And it disarms a lot of my critics. What can they say? They can't call me a mad scientist. I've already said that. They can't call me a hippie, because hippies were New Age settlers who showed up in the 1970s after the Aquarius Festival. I'm a hillbilly because my father's grandfather come here in 1882. I'm a free-range whitefella with only a touch of the tar brush. So anyway, I think I've just about covered all of the aspects. Bruce, stop shooting yourself in the foot, otherwise you'll be crawling around on the bloody stumps where your knees used to be, and you have not scored a single hit against the people that you have alienated. I wish you would stop alienating them, because I don't think you'll do very well over here on the island incontinent of Abatonia if the Kiwis deport you. With your attitude to government incompetence and bureaucratic stupidity, you will be seen as a dissident. And, let's face it, if you had been in Australia, and if Johnny Howard had been in power when you were trying to sell pulse jet engine technology to the Iranians, he would have put you in Guantanamo Bay with David Hicks. And if you hadn't noticed, the budgie smuggling wingnut wants to be an even greater military leader than Johnny Howard was, getting us involved in Absurdistan and Iraqistan. So no, a dissident like you, who hasn't been paying taxes in Australia for a very long time, I don't think you'll go over too well if you come over here and try and carry on like you've been carrying on in New Zealand. You catch more flies with a dish of honey than if you keep sticking out a saucer full of vinegar. The sheeple are not going to change. You have to reprocess your image in their sight. As long as they stop seeing you as being a threat, they will stop reacting to you as being a threat. So stop monstering them. Get them to laugh at you instead. It's the only thing that works. Why do you think they pay me a pension to sit out here? They think I'm a harmless nut. And as I say to people when they ask me why I don't give a shit about the appearance of everything, I explain that I'm not as silly as I look. It is protective coloration. I think I try to look as silly as I think everybody else really is. That way they figure I'm harmless, therefore they don't shoot me in my headlights. But I predict that if you keep being a burr under the saddle, the local model flyers, the council, the National Model Flying Administrative Authority, the CAA, you might need to turn your headlights off when you're opening your front gate at night, because you may acquire for yourself, or you may construct for yourself sufficient enmity that it isn't safe for you to walk around in the dark, because somebody will take a shot at you. The sheeple do not like being humiliated, Bruce. They will tolerate a harmless, competent smartass. They won't tolerate anybody who makes them flush with embarrassment and humiliation. I know you're a pretty bloody old dog to be learning new tricks, but you're just going to have to modify your soundtrack. Just modify your soundtrack. Every time you think of something excoriating to say that you will get a giggle out of, shut up. Because at the moment, Barry's the only person who's flying with you. And I notice that Barry is as deaf as 3 fence posts. So most of the snarky shit that you say about him while he's helping you make a movie goes over his head and he doesn't notice it. And then you fucking laugh at that too. Go and look in a mirror, Bruce. Listen to what I'm saying. Right? Because you don't want to live on a nutter's pension. You want to spend more money than that. You're not prepared to cut your expenses down to what you can get on the smell of an oily rag. You want to be a commercial success. Well, you can't be a commercial success if you alienate everybody. It's just not how humanity works. For whatever it's worth. 3:10 in the afternoon. That's 6 hours I've been trying to make this movie, Bruce. I think I'm going to post it anyway. With its glitches, it's better than nothing. Warple's on a lot to YouTube. XJet, RC model reviews, anybody else who cares to be interested. Ciao.